Good morning, welcome to Walden Farms. Today we're going to be making a lymphatic salve that's one of our family's favorites. We tend to use it a lot in colds when we're getting congestion in our ears and face. We'll rub it around the lymph nodes and down into the chest where it'll drain easier. I've also had it work really well with clients with fibroids or fibrocystic breast, or you could even use it with mastitis, really anywhere you want to rev up the lymphatic system and get stuff cleared out of the body. So here is the final product we're going for. It's going to use poke and violet, which are two of my favorite lymphatics and also really complementary working together. We'll talk more about that in the class. Thanks for joining.
Everybody's familiar with violet. So it grows pretty abundantly around here. We never really planted it. We just selectively weed to try to get more of it because it's an herb I really enjoy working with. Has anyone used it medicinally before? Okay. It is a great, gentle lymphatic. And a lymphatic is going to just help get the lymph system moving in the body and help with detoxification and just cleaning out gunk in there. It seems to work particularly well with like the throat, the breast, and like the belly area. It's used often for like fibroids or cysts in the ovaries or uterus and in the breast. I also find it really useful for sore throats and like congestion in the ears and stuff like that. So we use it in our sore throat spray for sore throats, but it also really, like any congestion, is going to help kind of move out and down. So we have the salve we're making today. Probably one of the most common ways I use it is for when the kids get a cold and their ears will start to get stopped up. We'll use it like all the way around the ear and just kind of follow those lymph nodes like down the throat and into the top of the chest. And you can really tell it makes a big difference with like the drainage through there and keeping them from getting sick. It's edible. You can try some. A really good way to get to know herbs is just, we won't do this with poke, but other herbs is just to take a little nibble of them. And you can tell a lot, especially when you're working with the energetics of a plant, through the taste of it and the feel of it in your mouth. Mm-hmm. So in herbal medicine, like looking at the energetics of the illness and the energetics of the person and the energetics of the plants and trying to bring that all into balance is a big part of healing. So when you chew up violet, you can tell like it feels a little slimy. So it's going to be a moistening herb, which is pretty important to know because there's not a ton of moistening herbs. So they're great to know which ones are because you can work with them in formulas. Like poke is super drying and super hot. So if you use it by itself, it can often be quite effective, but sometimes it pushes the body too far in that hot and dry direction. And so you can balance it with another lymphatic like violet that is cooling and moistening and have a little more neutral energetics in there, depending on the condition you're working with. That may be better a lot of the times than like a super hot and dry energetics. So we're going to pick some violet. And if you get a really good path of it, like some areas in here, we might go in with scissors and just kind of cut it with scissors. But it really doesn't take that long. Just kind of come in and start picking it.
You're just going to pinch off the top leaf?
Yeah. And it doesn't hurt to get stem in there. I just usually leave it and pick it off. So we have some poke here that's in kind of loamier soil, so it'll hopefully be a little easier to dig up. And these are probably less than a year old, so they may not have as huge roots as poke can get. But traditionally in the South, this was your spring tonic. So they would eat the greens and poke salad, and how they would do that, the greens do contain some of the poisonous constituents, but they boil off. So they would generally harvest the tender young leaves before there's red on the plant, and they would say that would make it a little less toxic. And they would boil it, pour off the water, boil it, pour off the water, boil it, pour off the water. So you pour off the water 3 times. And then taking it would just help thin the blood, kind of wake the body up, get the lymphatic system moving again in the early spring. It's Also, the berries on these aren't ripe, but they're starting to turn into berries. We saw some ripe ones up there. But you can use the berries. A lot of people with joint issues like rheumatoid arthritis will use it, and it will help with the joints. And for a cleanse with the berries, you would take 1 the first day, 2 the second day, 3 the third day, 4 the fourth day, and 5 the fifth day. And then work back down 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's kind of like a 9-day cleanse like that. And of course, if you're taking them and noticing your body being out of balance in any way, like too much heat or nausea or sweating, like heart palpitations, anything like that, you would quit going up on the dose. The root is going to be the strongest medicine. So in general, if you're tincturing that, you're going to tincture it 1 to 10 instead of 1 to 5, or 1 to 4 fresh instead of 1 to 2. And the maximum dose of it would be about 6 drops, single drops, not dropperfuls, 3 times a day. And then you can make the oil, which was what we're going to do today. It's great for moving the lymph system. Like we talked about, violet is just kind of like a gentle, nourishing lymphatic. Poke is like the rotor-rooter lymphatic. So it really gets in there and clears out. It's great for mastitis. I've woken up feeling like, oh no, like I'm starting to get mastitis. And I took like 1 to 2 drops of poke and went back to bed and woke up fine. Like it can really work great for that. This is where we have potatoes, so the soil is really soft and much easier to harvest. So we're chopping up our poke, and it's definitely one I like to work with and chop up while it's still fresh, because it gets very tough and about impossible to break up if you wait until it is dried. But it's pretty easy to cut up fresh. You want to wear gloves when you're cutting it up, because you can absorb some of the poke through your skin, so it's just better to wear gloves and be. So we have our chopped up fresh poke here, and we did that yesterday. You can see it really dries down. So we didn't have that much cut up yesterday, but a lot of herbs, you'll see how much water content there really is. Don't they say we're something like 70% water? But when you dry them, they definitely shrink down. So we'll work with that in our salve. And we'll just spread these out. And we have an Excalibur. So we have our dried poke and dried violet here, and a quart jar. And I'm going to do about 1.5 ounces of poke in each jar. There we go. And 3 ounces of violet. And violet, you'll see drying it too, it really dries down, where this was probably a couple of dehydrators full of violet. And that's like 0.3 ounces. So it takes a good bit of violet. These jar funnels are really helpful for packing it in there though. So that's about halfway there. So we have olive oil and castor oil. And for every salve, you just kind of have to think about what the purposes are and get familiar with the oils and their qualities. Olive oil is going to be a little thicker if you want something like absorbed real quickly and to be light. You can put it in like jojoba or almond oil, and it's going to be like a little lighter oil.
Olive oil and coconut MCT are what we go with for a bunch of our salves because they're pretty versatile. We do castor oil here because it has like a similar but milder effect as poke. It's actually made from the bean of the castor plant, which is also poisonous. It's what ricin comes from, actually. But when it's made into the oil, it's heated and that destroys the ricin. But it still has a lot of oils in it that are very moisturizing, and it also kind of gives you that drawing kind of quality. And it'll, like, a lot of people do castor oil packs by themselves just because they help with like fibroids or removing adhesions and helping with lymph flow. So using especially castor and poke, you may notice some redness on the skin just from like irritation and increased circulation. That's okay and normal. If like a bumpy rash developed, you might have an allergy or a bad reaction to one of the plants and you wouldn't want to use it again, but just a little surface redness is normal with castor oil. Castor oil is very thick, and you'll see it's going to take a little while longer to like go down in there. So I like to start with the olive oil. It's a pretty thick oil, but definitely thinner than castor. So do 14 ounces, just because I know from having done these sizes before, this is about 28 ounces of oil is going to fill this. So I do about equal amounts, and I'll measure the olive oil and then just fill it up the rest of the way with castor oil. I kind of got to give it a second to sink down in there. We order organic a lot of the times from a company called New Directions. Aromatics has a good selection of organic carrier oils for a decent price. But if you're just going with olive oil, you can get organic olive oil at Costco that's actually a similar price to that, if not a little cheaper at Costco. I'm pouring the castor, and you can see it's a lot thicker and it's going to sink down a lot slower. So I'm going to start pouring the olive oil on this one and just kind of keep coming back and forth to fill it up with castor. Our filled jars, and I like to leave just a little space up at the top because the oil will kind of bubble up and come out some. But the fun thing when you're making great body oils, when it does that, after I'm done infusing the oil, I'll usually like wait till that evening and pour the oil and the water in there into my bathtub and kind of get like the oil all over my body. So I'm gonna put water in up to the top of the crock pot, which is almost the top of the jars, and put it on the keep warm setting. I'm gonna leave it in there for about 48 hours. Heat and just infusing at room temperature if you're not in a hurry. Some oils, like if it was just violet, I would say it's fine to just infuse it for a month without heat. When you're talking like roots and berries and harder parts of the plants, I really like to add a little heat to it. So sometimes I'll do like a day in the crock pot and a couple of weeks just in a dark closet. You can just play around with it and see what you like. So usually when I'm doing a tincture, which we'll have classes on that too if y'all are interested in coming back for one of those, I'll press the material because it kind of rehydrates with water. And you can press and get more of the menstruum out. So the menstruum is what will come out when we strain it. So that'll be the alcohol, it'll be oil in this case, and the mark is what you're left with. When I'm making an oil, I don't press because either this was dried plant material, so we really won't get that much out from pressing. It doesn't really make it worth our time. Or if it's fresh plant material, you would get more out, but a lot of that would be water content, which you don't want in the oil. So either way, when I'm infusing an oil, I don't press it. And I'll just use gravity to strain it. I have the finished oil here. And what I do is just put it upside down, straining through that, and then I'll leave it for a long time. So I'll kind of do that at the start of the day while I have other stuff going on and forget about it and come back to it when I'm ready. Here, and it's been for almost 2 hours now draining, and you see that it's not really dropping much oil anymore. It is like very slowly. So I'm like, okay, that's good enough. So we'll just compost that, and we have our finished oil here, and we have about 6 cups of finished oil out of a half-gallon jar. Oil, so that's 9 times 8 is 72 ounces. And then we have our beeswax. We're gonna add to solidify it, and we make it in a ratio of about 1 to 5.5. So we'll take 72 and divide it by 5.5, and that would be 72 divided by 5.5. About 13 ounces of beeswax. So we're gonna get the scale. Because it's a little bit of a pain to clean. 13 ounces of beeswax. There we are. And then we're just going to put it on the stove and start getting it melted down. So the beeswax is all the way melted. I'm going to turn this down real low, and we will pour in our oil. And as you pour in the oil, if your oil is like room temperature, you're probably going to see the beeswax harden up some again, but it'll melt down pretty quickly as the oil warms up. And then when it's all completely melted, we'll pour it in the tins, and we'll pour it pretty quick, like, because it'll harden decently fast. So I'm going to pour it in here just so it's easier to pour into the tins. I'm just going to keep this on real low because it does start to harden pretty fast. And then I watch the edges of the salve container, and when it starts hitting those little lines, it kind of, you can tell that it's about full. I have a pretty good track record, but it like never fails. There's always like one you overflow and then it makes a big mess. Not today. As you can see, it already kind of like starts to harden on the side. So once we've poured our salve, it doesn't take long for it to harden, about 15 minutes, and there we have a finished salve. So easy to carry with us and easy to use, and that's it.